Nevertheless, number 2, failure is a setup for a comeback. Life operates by the same rules. Your lowest moment, whether a failed business, a rejected manuscript, or a personal tragedy, isn't your ending unless you choose to make it one. The Japanese concept of nana korobyoki, fall 7 times, rise 8, captures this perfectly. Resilience isn't about avoiding falls, but about ensuring your recoveries always outnumber them. Neuroscience reveals why this persistence pays off. Each time we push through adversity, our brain's neural pathways literally rewire to make future resilience easier, a phenomenon called experience-dependent neuroplasticity. Like building muscle through repeated exertion, we develop resilience strength through successive recoveries. This explains why people who've overcome multiple setbacks often handle new challenges with surprising calm. Their brains have been conditioned to interpret difficulties as temporary rather than terminal. The first rejection may crush you, the 10th will only annoy you, and by the 100th, you'll barely blink. What initially required tremendous effort becomes almost automatic, not because the obstacles got smaller, but because your capacity to overcome them grew larger. The business world provides countless examples of this principle in action. Colonel Sanders was 65 when he started pitching his chicken recipe, facing 1 in 9 rejections before finding his first partner. Soichiro Honda's early companies failed catastrophically before he revolutionized motorcycle manufacturing. These weren't charmed individuals blessed with unusual luck. They were ordinary people who simply refused to let rejection have the final word. Their eventual success wasn't the result of some pivotal breakthrough moment, but the cumulative effect of outlasting everyone else's willingness to quit. In entrepreneurship, as in life, the finish line often goes not to the swiftest, but to those most stubborn in their refusal to be counted out. This mindset transforms how we interpret setbacks. A failed project becomes tuition rather than loss. A rejection letter turns into evidence of courage rather than inadequacy. Even devastating personal tragedies, while never minimized, can become part of your resilience story rather than the conclusion of your dreams. Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl observed that while we can't control what happens to us, we always control how we respond, and in that response lies our ultimate power. People who've survived unimaginable hardships often demonstrate this most profoundly, not by pretending their pain doesn't exist, but by choosing to build meaning from it rather than be destroyed by it. The practical application of this principle requires daily discipline. It means making the next move even when motivation has evaporated, sending one more solution when all others have failed. It demands what psychologists call realistic optimism, acknowledging current difficulties while maintaining ironclad belief in eventual progress. Most importantly, it requires separating your identity from temporary outcomes, understanding that a failed attempt doesn't make you a failure any more than a successful one makes you flawless. Your essence isn't defined by what happens to you, but by how you choose to respond. This relentless commitment to rising creates its own momentum. Each comeback, no matter how small, becomes psychological armor against future setbacks. You develop what Navy SEALs call stress inoculation, the ability to perform under pressure because you've survived worse. Soon, you're not just bouncing back from failures, you're anticipating them as inevitable steps in your progression. The falls still hurt, but they no longer surprise you. And with each recovery, you move closer to what Winston Churchill famously called success, that state of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Because in the end, life's winners aren't those who never get knocked down. They're simply those who got back up one more time than they fell. Failure operates like a merciless sculptor, chiseling away the non-essential until only truth remains. That polished business plan you spent months perfecting, failure reveals its fatal flaw. That brilliant theory you were certain would revolutionize your field, failure exposes its weak premise. This brutal but necessary stripping process, while painful in the moment, provides the clearest path to authentic achievement. When our carefully constructed illusions of competence come crashing down, we're forced to confront reality, not as we wish it to be, but as it actually is. The ego hates this process, clinging to its narratives of superiority and destined success. But the part of us that genuinely wants to grow learns to welcome these humbling moments as rare opportunities to see clearly. Consider how failure functions in nature's design. Forest fires that appear destructive actually clear out weak undergrowth, allowing sunlight to reach the healthiest trees. Similarly, professional and personal failures burn away superficial strategies, leaving only the most robust approaches standing. The tech industry understands this principle intuitively. Successful startups often emerge from the ashes of multiple failed ventures, with each collapse teaching the founders what doesn't work. These entrepreneurs don't mourn their dead companies, they harvest the lessons like farmers gathering crops, knowing the fertile soil of failure yields the richest insights. What remains after ego's destruction isn't despair, but something far more valuable: clarity. The psychological transformation failure triggers follows a predictable pattern. Initially, we experience what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort when reality contradicts our self-perception. The ambitious student who fails a critical exam, the seasoned professional whose can't-miss project flops, the artist whose masterpiece receives scathing reviews, all face this jarring disconnect between expectation and reality. But here's where growth happens, in that uncomfortable gap. Either we double down on denial, blaming circumstances, or we do the harder work of honest self. Those who choose the latter path emerge with something money can't buy: authentic understanding of their real strengths and limitations. History's most impactful innovators all endured this ego-stripping process. Before creating the light bulb, Edison didn't just fail, he documented thousands of unsuccessful attempts, systematically eliminating what didn't work. Modern scientific research follows the same principle. The peer review process intentionally subjects ideas to rigorous failure tests before accepting them as valid. This isn't academic hazing, it's quality control for human knowledge. The theories that survive this gauntlet aren't just clever ideas, they're models that actually correspond to reality. In your own life, the strategies and beliefs that withstand repeated failures aren't just comfortable assumptions. They're the ones truly worth keeping. This refining fire of failure affects personal growth just as powerfully. The romantic relationship that collapses reveals which compromises were unsustainable. The friendship that ends over conflict shows where boundaries needed strengthening. Even physical failures, the injury that sidelines an athlete, the illness that interrupts busy lives, force reevaluation of priorities and methods. What emerges from these experiences isn't a diminished self, but a more authentic version, less concerned with appearances, more focused on substance. People who've weathered significant failures often develop what psychologists term earned security, a quiet confidence rooted in knowing exactly what they can and cannot do. The business world's most effective leaders understand this principle at organizational levels. Companies that conduct rigorous postmortems on failed projects, that celebrate intelligent risks even when they don't pay off, create cultures where ego takes a backseat to results. These organizations don't just tolerate failure, they mine it for golden insights about customer needs, market dynamics, and operational weaknesses. Their competitive advantage comes not from avoiding mistakes, but from learning faster from them than their rivals. The same applies to individuals. Your career trajectory depends less on never failing than on how quickly and thoroughly you extract lessons when you do. This ongoing refinement process never truly ends. Just when we think we've pared away all illusions, life presents new challenges that reveal fresh layers of ego to be burned away. But with each cycle, the process becomes less terrifying and more illuminating. We start to recognize failure not as the enemy of success, but as its quality control mechanism, the exacting standard that ensures only our most authentic, tested, and resilient selves get to cross the finish line. What remains after all these trials isn't just competence, but wisdom, the hard-won understanding that real growth begins where our self-deceptions end. The greatest misconception about success is that it belongs to those who avoid failure, when in truth, it rewards those who collect failures like rare coins, studying each one until its lessons shine. Behind every overnight sensation lies a hidden graveyard of abandoned projects, rejected proposals, and humiliating missteps. The higher you climb in any field, the more failure scars you'll find on those at the summit. Pulitzer Prize winners have novels rotting in drawers, Nobel scientists have years of disproven hypotheses, tech billionaires have bankrupt companies in their past. These aren't blemishes to hide, but credentials proving they've paid their dues in the only currency that matters: real-world experience. Examine any domain and you'll find this pattern holds. In medicine, the most sought-after surgeons aren't those with perfect records, but those who've survived complications and learned to prevent them. On Wall Street, veteran traders who weathered multiple market crashes command respect no MBA can buy. Even in creative fields, the artists with staying power are those who endured early obscurity rather than burning out after initial fame. Their advantage isn't genetic. It's experiential. Each failure added another layer to their professional intuition, another entry in their mental database of what to avoid. While newcomers theorize, these veterans operate from hard-won knowledge of what actually works when theory meets reality's sharp edges. The psychology behind this phenomenon reveals why failure-rich backgrounds create superior performance. Cognitive scientists find that expertise develops through what's called error-based learning. The brain literally rewires itself more from mistakes than easy successes. MRI scans show more robust neural activity when people analyze failures compared to victories. This explains why students who struggle with difficult problems develop deeper understanding than those who coast through simple tasks. The most successful people don't have some magical immunity to failure. They simply extract more value from each stumble, turning setbacks into cognitive upgrades. Industries at the innovation frontier institutionalize this understanding. Silicon Valley venerates failure resumes, where founders document their bankrupt ventures and disastrous launches. Scientific research expects multiple hypothesis rejections before breakthroughs. Professional sports teams analyze game film, focusing more on errors than scoring plays. These fields recognize that proper failure processing creates what psychologist Carol Dweck terms growth mindset, the belief that abilities develop through effort rather than being fixed traits. The result? Individuals who view each failure not as identity-defining verdict, but as temporary data point in their ongoing evolution. This failure accumulation advantage manifests most clearly during crises. When unexpected challenges hit, those with long failure histories don't panic. They recognize familiar patterns. The entrepreneur who survived multiple recessions spots warning signs others missed. The scientist whose experiments failed for years knows precisely how to troubleshoot. Their experience acts like a mental library of potential solutions, while those protected from failure often freeze like deer in headlights. Navy SEAL training proves this principle daily. Candidates aren't selected for physical prowess alone, but for demonstrated ability to fail repeatedly and keep adapting. The business world now systematically harvests this wisdom. Companies like Intuit host failure conferences where employees share costly mistakes. Amazon's correction of error reports analyze failures in granular detail. These organizations understand that properly documented failures become institutional wisdom, preventing future stumbles. On individual levels, maintaining a lessons learned journal transforms random setbacks into a curated education. Over time, this accumulated knowledge creates what investors call experience judgment, the uncanny ability to assess risks and opportunities that eludes those with thinner failure portfolios. Perhaps most importantly, extensive failure experience breeds the one trait no success can provide: humility. Those who've been humbled repeatedly develop what psychologists call accurate self-assessment, recognizing both their capabilities and limitations with clear-eyed precision. This prevents the hubris that destroys many promising careers while allowing measured confidence where it's warranted. Their hard-earned wisdom tells them that today's victory likely contains tomorrow's failure seed, and vice versa, keeping them perpetually learning regardless of circumstances. The takeaway isn't to seek failure for its own sake, but to recognize its essential role in genuine achievement. When you next face rejection or setback, consider this. You're not moving away from success, but accumulating the very experiences that will make your eventual breakthrough possible. The most impressive resumes aren't those with flawless records. They're those thick with honorable failures that testify to someone's willingness to persist until they got it right. In the end, success doesn't go to those who fail least, but to those who fail most intelligently. True comebacks, the kind that transform devastating setbacks into legendary turnarounds, never happen by accident. They emerge from a deliberate three-part alchemy that separates temporary rebounds from lasting reinventions. First comes the unflinching honesty to stare at failure without blinking, to dissect what went wrong without sugarcoating or scapegoating. Next comes the adaptive intelligence to pivot strategies while maintaining core values. Finally, the relentless effort to outwork doubters and outlast obstacles. Together, these elements form the DNA of every great resurgence story in business, sports, and personal growth. Honesty serves as the foundation, though it's often the most painful step. When Howard Schultz returned to Starbucks after an 8-year absence, he didn't blame market conditions or franchisees for the company's decline. He admitted the brand had lost its soul by prioritizing growth over experience. This brutal clarity enabled precise corrections rather than superficial fixes. Psychological research shows that people who practice radical honesty in assessing failures recover faster because they're addressing real problems rather than symptoms. The executive who acknowledges their leadership missteps, the athlete who admits their training complacency, the artist who recognizes when their work has grown stale, these are the ones positioned for true comebacks because they're building on truth rather than excuses. Adaptation represents the creative pivot point where insight meets action. When Nintendo faced irrelevance in the early 2000s, they didn't just make better gaming hardware, they completely reimagined who could be a gamer with the Wii's motion controls. This kind of transformational adaptation goes beyond tweaking. It requires what psychologist Carol Dweck calls the power of yet. trait, the ability to say this approach isn't working yet. The most effective adapters balance two seemingly contradictory traits: the flexibility to change methods with the conviction to stay true to ultimate objectives. Pixar's near failure during Toy Story 2's production forced them to adapt their creative process while doubling down on storytelling excellence, a pivot that fueled their golden age of animation. Relentless effort acts as the engine that powers the comeback journey. When Roger Federer fell to 11 in tennis rankings after years of dominance, he didn't just adjust his backhand. He completely rebuilt his game at age 35, training with the hunger of a rookie while leveraging the wisdom of a veteran. Neuroscience reveals why this combination proves so potent. The brain's myelin sheath thickens with repeated effort, making skills more automatic, while accumulated experience allows for more strategic practice. Comeback efforts differ from initial attempts in their quality of focus. They're not just working harder, but working smarter on the right things. The 20% of efforts that yield 80% of results. The interplay between these three elements creates a virtuous cycle. Honesty identifies the exact areas needing adaptation. Adaptation makes effort more productive. Effort provides new data to fuel honest assessment. Consider how Apple's resurgence combined all three. Jobs' honest admission that their products had grown mediocre, the adaptive leap to integrated hardware/software ecosystems, and the relentless perfectionism that produced the iPod, just as digital music exploded. This pattern repeats in personal turnarounds. The laid-off executive who honestly evaluates skill gaps, adapts by entering a new industry, and outworks younger competitors often surpasses their previous success. Modern business strategies now institutionalize this comeback trinity. Tech companies conduct pre-mortems imagining future failures to practice honest assessment. Agile methodologies build constant adaptation into development cycles. Growth hacking emphasizes relentless experimentation with measurable effort. These frameworks recognize that sustainable success isn't about avoiding falls, but about mastering the science of rising, a skill increasingly vital in our volatile economy where disruption cycles accelerate. On individual levels, this triad transforms how we approach challenges. The student who fails an important exam gains more from honest self-assessment, adapted study methods, and disciplined practice than from simple retesting. Relationships mended through genuine apology, honesty, changed behaviors, adaptation, and consistent follow-through grow stronger than those papered over with quick fixes. Even health recoveries follow this pattern. Patients who frankly confront their conditions, adapt lifestyles accordingly, and diligently adhere to treatments achieve far better outcomes than those seeking magic bullets. The most inspiring comebacks share this three-part architecture, whether in public or private struggles. They demonstrate that rock bottom becomes solid foundation when you're willing to face hard truths, creatively reinvent your approach, and grind through the inevitable resistance. These stories resonate because they reveal a universal truth. Failure isn't final unless you lack the honesty to learn from it, the adaptability to evolve beyond it, or the perseverance to outlast it. When these three forces converge, what appears as a comeback is actually someone becoming who they needed to be all along. The most transformative breakthroughs often emerge from what first appear to be catastrophic endings. That moment when everything collapses, when the business fails, the relationship ends, or the dream seems shattered, contains hidden potential waiting to be activated. Like seeds that require the intense heat of forest fires to germinate, human potential often needs the friction of complete breakdown to trigger its next evolutionary leap. History's most inspiring comebacks share this paradoxical origin point. The very experience that seemed designed to destroy them became the crucible that forged their future success. What makes the difference between those who remain crushed and those who rise isn't the severity of their fall, but their ability to recognize that rock bottom makes for the sturdiest foundation. Psychology reveals why these crisis points prove so transformative. When our carefully constructed lives collapse, we enter what researchers call liminal space, a threshold period where old identities have dissolved, but new ones haven't yet formed. While profoundly uncomfortable, this mental state carries unique advantages: heightened creativity, increased openness to change, and greater willingness to take risks. The brain, forced out of its habitual patterns, begins making unexpected connections. It's no coincidence that many successful pivots, from Starbucks' revival under Howard Schultz to Apple's resurgence with the iPod, emerged from near-bankruptcy experiences. Desperation, when properly channeled, becomes an unparalleled strategic advantage over complacent competitors. Physical science mirrors this principle. The phenomenon of supercompensation shows how muscles broken down through intense stress rebuild stronger during recovery. SpaceX's early rocket explosions provided data that made eventual landings possible. In nature, forest fires that appear destructive actually clear space for new growth while returning nutrients to the soil. These systems teach the same lesson. What appears to be destruction is often the necessary precondition for unprecedented growth. Your lowest moments function similarly. They strip away what wasn't working, leaving only the essential elements from which to rebuild something more resilient. Personal reinventions follow identical patterns. The executive laid off at 50 starts the consulting firm they'd always dreamed of. The athlete whose injury ends their playing career becomes a groundbreaking coach. The artist whose traditional work gets rejected develops an entirely new style that defines a movement. These aren't consolation prizes. They're upgrades that only became possible because the original path closed. Research on post-traumatic growth confirms that people frequently report positive psychological changes after crises, including renewed purpose and discovered strengths, provided they engage with the challenge rather than avoid it. The business world's most dramatic turnarounds demonstrate this principle at scale. Nintendo shifted from playing cards to video games after near bankruptcy. Netflix transformed from DVD rentals to streaming dominance when technology threatened its core business. These companies didn't just recover, they used existential threats to catapult beyond their original ambitions. Their secret wasn't avoiding failure, but leveraging it to make changes that would have been impossible during times of stability. When you have nothing left to lose, you gain the freedom to attempt what others consider unthinkable. This dynamic plays out in quieter but equally profound ways in everyday lives. The failed marriage that teaches what real partnership requires, the financial crisis that instills lasting money wisdom, the health scare that inspires complete lifestyle transformation. These experiences share a common thread. They provide the emotional fuel and clarity necessary to make changes that would have remained theoretical during comfortable times. The pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of changing. The key to harnessing these moments lies in perspective shift. What if your lowest point isn't punishment but preparation? Not a verdict on your past, but an invitation to your future. When we stop resisting breakdowns and start mining them for insights, we discover they contain precise instructions for our next chapter. The parts that hurt most reveal what needs attention. The dreams that persist despite failure show where to focus. The people who stand by us clarify who really matters. Ultimately, our lowest moments function like chrysalises, temporary containers where disintegration precedes metamorphosis. The darkness isn't permanent, it's the necessary condition for rebirth. Those who understand this don't just endure their valleys, they actively prospect them for gold. They know that while no one chooses painful transitions, we all get to choose what we build from the rubble. And often, what emerges from those fragments surpasses anything that could have been constructed on untested ground. Your greatest rise awaits, not despite your lowest moment, but because of it.